13 Roads. Here is a tale I have not yet forgotten. Tovin walked off the quiet road with no voice left in him. He had gone in with his uncle and with me, and he came out alone in the dark 4 days later. And in all the years since, he has not willingly said one word. Not his uncle's name, not his own. His own name is the single word he will not say at all, and tonight I am going to tell you why. Because the why of it is the most useful thing I have ever carried out of any forest. The old man came back too. That is the part the boundary villagers will not repeat, even drunk, even to each other. Halse came back 3 nights after the road had already taken him, came back walking, came back smiling, came back wearing his own face. And the thing that climbed the slope in that smiling, stolen face was not the boy's uncle, and it knew the boy's name, and it wanted Tovin to answer to it more than any starving thing has ever wanted anything in this world. The boy did not answer. That is the whole of why he is alive, and it cost him every word he had. It happened on the road they call the Quiet Road. The name is not poetry, it is an instruction, and the trappers and charcoal burners who live at that road's edge will give you the instruction before you have finished asking them the way. They tell it the way other men say grace. On the quiet road, you do not speak. You do not sing. You do not whistle. You do not call ahead to the man walking in front of you. You do not answer. Especially, they say, you do not answer. I had walked it 4 times before the year I am telling you about. I had brought 11 people onto it. I had brought 6 of them off. That is not a good number. It is, for the quiet road, a number that got me hired. The old man came to me in a town at the boundary called Mel, in the wet end of autumn, and his name was Halse. He was a trapper, and he had the trapper's hands. Too many small white scars, 2 fingers that no longer fully closed. And he had walked the edges of the quiet road his whole life, and earned his living off its first half mile, and never, not once, gone in past the boundary stones. He told me that himself, the first night, plainly, the way an honest man tells you the size of the thing he is afraid of, so you will not have to guess. He wanted to go in, all the way in. He wanted to reach a place the boundary men spoke of only when they were drunk and sorry for it. A hermitage, deep, where the road bent around a black tarn, and a few silent brothers had once kept a house of prayer and no longer answered anyone who walked out to ask if they were living. His brother had gone there, 9 years before. Halse's brother, a younger man, a better man, Halse said, in the flat way that meant he had decided this a long time ago and would not be argued out of it. His brother had walked down the quiet road to the hermitage to take holy orders and had sent back 1 letter, and then 9 years of nothing. The brother's name was Edrin, and Edrin had left behind a wife who was now in the ground, and a son. The son was Tovin. He is 17, Halse said. He has a right to know if his father is a living man or a dead one. I've put it off until he was old enough to walk it. He is old enough. I'm not getting younger. I will pay what you ask. I asked a great deal. I always do for that road. Halse did not blink. He counted it onto the table in old coin, and he counted it twice, and the second time was so I would understand that he had known the price before he came, and had simply decided that his brother was worth it. I met the boy the next morning, and I will tell you what I saw, because it matters later. Tovin was lean and quiet and watchful in the way of a boy raised by a man who did not talk much. He had learned to read a face the way other children learn to read letters, because in his house, the face was where the information was kept. He carried his father's coat. It did not fit him. He had rolled the cuffs twice, and it still hung off him like a flag off a still pole, and I understood without being told that he had been wearing it for years on purpose, growing toward it, the way you grow toward a coat or a name or a grave you have decided is yours to fill. He did not ask me whether his father was alive. That is the thing I want you to hold. A boy walks 4 days into the worst road in the north to learn if his father is living, and on the first morning he does not ask the guide who has walked that road, who might know whether there is any hope. He did not ask because he had already decided the asking was a kind of speaking, and he had heard the rule, and he had decided to begin obeying it early, to practice. He was, from the first morning, better at being quiet than any grown man I have ever taken down that road. I thought then that this would save him. We left the third man at the boundary. I should say that there had been a third. Halse had hired a porter in Mel, a broad, slow, patient man named Corin, to carry the dried food and the lamp oil and the rope, because an old trapper and a boy cannot carry 4 days in and 4 days out. Corin walked with us as far as the boundary stones, 2 grey pillars, leaning, older than the road's name, older than the language the name is in, and at the boundary stones, Corin stopped. He did not stop because he was a coward. I want to be fair to him. He stopped because he had a wife and 3 children in Mel, and he had asked, in Mel, the men who knew, and the men who knew had told him, and he had listened. He set the packs down on our side of the stones. He looked at the old man and the boy for a moment. He did not say anything. He had crossed far enough in by then to know better. He only touched 2 fingers to his own brow, the way you do at a graveside, and he turned and walked back out into the ordinary world. We watched him go. The boy watched him longest. Then we shouldered what we could carry, and we stepped between the stones, and the quiet road took us. I have walked roads that announce themselves. The iron road gives you gallows at every crossing. The ash road gives you smoke you can taste from a day out. The quiet road does not announce itself. The quiet road simply, gradually, takes things away. First it took the wind. Inside the boundary stones there was no wind, though we could see, very high up, the tops of the oldest pines moving against the grey, moving steadily, in a wind that was happening up there and was not permitted down here. Then it took the small sounds. The boundary forest had been full of them, the ordinary blessed clutter of a living wood, birds, the tick of insects, the dry conversation of leaves. 100 steps in, those were gone, not hushed, gone, the way a sound is gone when a door closes on it. Then it took our footsteps. The moss on the quiet road is deep and pale and slightly warm, and it does to a footfall what a held hand does to a struck bell. By the first evening, we walked 4 people's weight of boots over old ground, and made, between the 3 of us, between the 2 of us and the boy, almost nothing. And into that nothing, the road put a pressure. That is the only word I have ever found for it. The silence on the quiet road is not empty. It is a held breath. It is the quiet of a large room in which something has heard you come in and has decided for now to remain still. The boy felt it. I watched him feel it. By the first evening, he had stopped even the small, unconscious sounds a body makes without asking. The hum, the cleared throat, the tuneless breath through the teeth. He had folded all of that down and put it away. Halse, beside him, had not. Halse was an old man and a brave one, and he had spent his life at the edge of this place, and a man cannot unlearn 60 years of being a creature that makes noise in 4 days of trying. That, in the end, was the whole of it. That was the difference between the one the road sent back and the one it kept. Not courage, not love. There was no shortage of love. The love was the reason they had come. Only this. The boy could be silent all the way down. The old man could not. We made the first camp in the lee of a fallen pine, so vast that its upturned root plate stood higher than a house, a wall of black earth and broken root holding 100 years of dark. I built the fire small. You build the fire small on the quiet road. A fire is light, and light is a kind of speech. And besides, a big fire breathes. It snaps, it sighs, it throws sparks that tick against stone. And every sound it makes is a sound you did not choose to make and cannot take back. A A small fire only glows. We ate dried meat and hard bread, and we did not speak, and the dark came down through the pines, the color of slate, and I took the first watch. I want to tell you about that first night, because nothing happened, and the nothing is the point. I sat with my back to the root plate, and I watched the boys sleep, and the old man sleep, and I listened. A guide on the quiet road does not listen for danger the way you listen for danger on other roads. There is nothing to hear coming. The moss eats the warning. What you listen for, instead, is the moment the silence changes its mind. The moment the held breath becomes a held breath that is held toward you. It did not that night. The road let us alone. It was only listening. I have thought about that first night many times since. I think the quiet road spent it the way a man spends the first evening with a guest he intends to rob. Pleasantly, attentively, learning the house. Learning, in the dark, under the moss, the particular shape of the 3 sleeping noises we made. Learning the old man's, learning the boys. Learning which of us, when the time came, would be easiest to call. The second day the road began very gently to test us. It did it with voices that were almost nothing. A guide learns the difference, and I will try to give it to you, because Tovin learned it on the second day, and it is the reason he is alive. There is a sound the deep forest makes that is not the forest. It is faint, and it is always just at the edge, over the next rise, behind the last tree you passed. And the first time you hear it, you will be certain, completely certain, that it is a real and ordinary thing. A bird you do not know. Water somewhere. 2 branches grieving against each other in the high wind that is not allowed down where you are. It is none of those things. It is the road clearing its throat. It is the road trying the lock. The first one came at mid-morning. It was, I would have sworn, the cry of a hunting bird, far off, lonely, 3 notes falling. Halse's head came up. Halse had heard 10,000 hunting birds in his life, and his body answered before his mind could stop it. His lips parted, the way an old hunter's lips part to answer a bird, to call it. The oldest reflex he owned. I caught his arm. I did not speak. You learn to do everything without speaking. I only caught his arm hard, and I looked at him, and I shook my head once, slowly, and I held his eyes until I was certain the reflex had passed. The boy had seen it. The boy had seen all of it. The falling notes, the old man's lips, my hand. And I watched Tovin take that lesson and swallow it whole. I watched him understand, at 17, on the second morning, the entire law of the quiet road in one piece. That the road would spend days offering him sounds that begged to be answered, and that each one was a question, and that the only safe answer was to be a person who did not answer questions. He nodded at me, once, the way a man nods who has just been handed something heavy and wants you to know he has a good grip on it. 3 more came before dark. A dog, impossibly, barking. A farm dog, a homely sound, the most homesick sound there is. Then a sound like a man chopping wood, steady, patient, just out of sight, the most ordinary labor in the world. Then, near dusk, worst of all, a sound like someone weeping. Not loud. A woman or a child, somewhere off the road to the left, weeping the tired, private way people weep when they have been doing it a long time and no longer expect to be heard. The boy's jaw set. The old man's hand found the boy's shoulder. Nobody walked toward the weeping. Nobody made a sound. And the weeping, after a while, stopped. The way a thing stops when it has finished a task and is putting the tool down to pick up a better one. The second night, the old man could not sleep, and that was the beginning of the end of him, though none of us knew it yet. I had the watch, and I sat against a stone, and I listened. And 3 times, before the moon was high, I heard Halse turn over in his blanket. The fourth time he did not turn over. He sat up. He sat with his arms around his knees and his eyes open, an old man looking into a small fire, and I could see on his face the particular labor that the quiet road sets every living thing it gets hold of. You must understand what the silence does. It is not the silence itself. It is that the silence leaves a man alone with the inside of his own head, and the inside of a man's head is the noisiest place there is. Halse had 9 years of not knowing whether his brother was alive. He had carried that the way you carry a stone in a boot for so long that the limp becomes the way you walk. And the quiet road took away every other sound and left him alone with that one, and turned it up. He began, very softly, to talk to himself. I do not think he knew he was doing it. It was barely a sound, less than a whisper, the shape of words with almost no breath behind them, the way an old man's mouth moves over a prayer or a grievance worn so smooth it no longer needs the voice. Edrin, his mouth said to the fire. Edrin, I came. You see that I came. I crossed to him. I put my hand flat on his chest, over the heart, which is the sign I use for stop. And he stopped, and he looked at me, and in the firelight his eyes were wet and ashamed, and very, very tired. And from somewhere out in the dark, off to the left, where the weeping had been the evening before, something repeated it back, not loudly, not as a voice yet. It was the shape of what he had said, returned to us across the moss in a register that was not quite sound. I came. The cadence of it, the grief in it, played back the way a child plays back a phrase in a language it does not speak, for the music. The old man went white. The boy, I had thought the boy asleep. The boy was not asleep. The boy had not truly slept since the boundary stones. The boy sat up with his father's coat clutched at the collar, and he looked out into the dark where the sound had come from, and then he looked at his uncle, and I watched the boy understand that the road now had a sample of Halse's voice, and his uncle's brother's name, and his uncle's particular grief, and that it would be practicing. We did not sleep again that night. We sat, the three of us, close to the small fire, and we were silent, and the road around us was silent, and it was the silence of a room in which someone has sat down at an instrument and is quietly, patiently, finding the notes. The third day we came down toward the tarn. You feel the tarn before you see it. The quiet road, for 2 days, had run more or less level through the pines, and on the third morning it began to go down, not steeply, but steadily, the way the floor of a great hall slopes toward the thing the hall was built around. The trees changed. They had been old. Now they became something past old. They became patient. The trunks went broad and black, and the bark hung off them in long strips like cloth, and the moss climbed everything and put a soft, pale skin over the world, over the fallen wood, over the stones, over, once, a shape beside the road that had the length and the stillness of a man lying down, and that none of us walked closer to confirm. And the calls came all day, and they were no longer birds. The road had finished with birds. The road had listened to us for 2 days, and it had taken our measure, and it had thrown the birds away. Now, when a sound came out of the trees, it came in a human register. A man's low laugh, twice. Once at nothing, once at nothing again. A few notes of a lullaby, wordless, in a woman's voice. The particular lullaby a tired mother hums when the child is nearly down. And names. It had begun, by the third afternoon, to try names. Tovin, the trees said once, mildly, conversationally, from the right. The way you say a name when you have only a small, ordinary thing to tell the person. The boy did not so much as turn his head. I have taken hard men down that road who turned their heads. The boy had decided, somewhere in his quiet, ferocious heart, that he did not have a name anymore. That for as long as he was on the quiet road, the sound, Tovin, was simply a noise the forest made, like water, like wind, a thing with no claim on him. And he held to that, and he did not turn his head, and the road did not get him. It was learning, though, where the doors were. It tried Tovin once. It did not waste a second try on the boy. It had felt the door not move. It turned, for the rest of that day, to the old man. And the old man's door was not locked. The old man's door had been standing open for 9 years, with a brother's name written over it and a light left on. We made the last camp on a shelf of dry ground above the tarn, with the black water down through the trees below us, flat and without a single ripple, holding the grey sky like a sheet of poured iron. Somewhere along its far shore, Halse believed, was the hermitage. We would reach it the next day. We had come, in every sense, as far down as the road went. I built the fire. We ate. And I did something I had not done in 4 crossings of the quiet road. I broke the rule, on purpose, in the smallest possible way, because I had decided the boy needed to hear it once in a human voice, and that the risk was worth the once. I leaned to Tovin, and I put my mouth almost against his ear, and under the absolute floor of my breath, with no voice in it at all, I told him the last thing a guide can give. Whatever you hear tonight, whatever it sounds like, whoever it sounds like, you do not answer it, not out loud, not in your head. If it sounds like me, you do not answer. If it sounds like him, I moved my eyes to his uncle, you do not answer. The one it takes is the one who answers. Be nobody, be the moss, live. The boy looked at me, and he nodded, that same nod, the good grip on the heavy thing, and I believed him, and I was right to. I did not say it to Halse. I have asked myself in the years since why I did not crawl the other way around the fire and put my mouth to the old man's ear and give him the same words. I think, and this is not a kind thing to know about yourself, I think I did not say it to Halse because I already knew it would not hold. I had watched him for 3 days. I had watched the door stand open. You do not waste your last and most dangerous words on the lock that is already broken. You spend them on the one that might still close. I have made my peace with most of what that road took from me. I have not entirely made my peace with that. It came in the deepest part of the night, and it came, as I had known it would, in his brother's voice. I was on watch. The fire was a red eye. The boy was a still shape with his father's coat pulled to his chin, breathing slow. Awake, I think. He was almost always awake, but lying still and being the moss. The old man was asleep at last, the poor, exhausted sleep of a body that has refused rest for 2 nights and finally been overruled by itself. And out of the dark below us, from down by the black water, a voice said, "Halse, I want to be careful here, because this is the center of it." It was not a trick. That is the thing people never understand who have not been down that road. It was not a clever imitation, a thing you could have caught out, a thing with a wrong note in it that a careful man would have heard. I had never met Edrin, but I knew, the instant that sound crossed the water, with a certainty that went under reason and under courage and under everything a man uses to keep himself safe. I knew that it was exactly his brother's voice. The road had not copied Edrin. By the 3rd night, the road simply had Edrin, had the warmth of him, the particular way the voice went down and gentled on the second half of the name, the way a voice does only when it belongs to someone who loves you and is glad, right now, in this moment, to see you. Halse, it said again from the dark, glad and low and patient. Halse, you came all this way. Brother, come down. I am only down here at the water. Come down and see me. The old man woke. I was already moving. I came across the camp, low and fast and silent, and I got my hand over his mouth before his eyes were even fully open. I am quick. It is the one gift the salt black left me. I am very quick. And I held the old man's jaw shut with the whole strength of my arm, and I put my face down over his so that the first thing he saw, swimming up out of sleep, was me, and my eyes, and my head going slowly, slowly, side to side. No, no, no. And he understood. I felt him understand. I felt the understanding go through his old body under my hands. I felt him hear the voice, and know the voice, and know what the voice was, and know what I was telling him and why. All of it, every part of it, complete. He understood everything. I need you to know that. Whatever else I tell you about the old man, he was not a fool, and he was not weak, and at the end he was not deceived. He knew it was not his brother. He knew that to answer was to die. He knew, with my hand on his mouth, exactly what he was being asked to choose. And down at the water the voice said, very gently, and this is the cruelty of the quiet road, this is the whole engine of it. The voice said, Halse, it's all right. I forgive you for not coming sooner. Brother, I always knew you would come. And the old man closed his eyes, and a single tear went sideways across the bridge of his nose and fell off into the moss without a sound. And he reached up with his scarred trapper's hand, and he took my wrist, not to pull my hand away, gently, the way you take the hand of someone you are about to leave, to thank them. He held my wrist for a moment, and then he turned his face, just enough, against my palm and into my hand. In barely more than a breath, the old man answered. Edrin, he said. One word, his brother's name. The only answer love had ever been going to let him give. And the quiet road, which had waited 3 days and worn out a dead man's voice to earn that single word, the quiet road took it and took him. He was up before I could close my hand. I have told you I am quick. I was not quick enough, and I have had years to be honest about why. It was not that the old man was fast. It was that some part of me, in the half-breath after he said the name, did not try. Some part of me had already let go. You cannot hold a man on the quiet road after he has answered. The road has him by then. My hand was still warm from his mouth, and he was already standing, already turning, already walking down toward the black water with the long, loose, unhurried stride of a man going to meet someone he loves. The boy lunged after him. I caught the boy. That much I did do. I got both arms around Tovin from behind, and I locked them, and I held, and the boy did not cry out, even then, even with his uncle walking away into the dark. The boy fought me in total silence, which is a terrible thing to feel. A young body spending everything it has and refusing to spend the one thing that would have been easy. He fought me until Halse was a grey shape, and then a smudge, and then nothing. And then he stopped fighting, and we stood there, the boy and I, in the ruin of the camp, and we listened. For a while there was nothing. The old man walked down toward the tarn, and the moss took his footsteps, and the road gave us a silence so complete it had a weight to it, a pressure on the ears, the silence of a held breath at the very top of its hold. And then, from far down by the water, the old man began to laugh. It was a glad sound. That is the part I cannot make soften, however I tell it. It was not a scream. It was Halse, somewhere down in the dark by the black tarn, laughing the way a man laughs who has walked 9 years with a stone in his boot and has just been told he can set it down. A wet, broken, joyful laugh. And under it his voice saying a word again and again, saying, "Edrin, Edrin, Edrin." The way you say the name of someone you are running the last few steps toward. The boy made no sound, but I felt him hear it. I felt it go into him, and I felt where it stopped. And then the laughing changed. I will not pretend I can describe the moment it turned, because there was no moment. That is the cruelty of it. The laugh did not break, it curdled. The same sound carried over without a seam from joy into something that was still shaped like joy, but had agony living inside the shape. The word changed too. Edrin came apart. The middle fell out of it, and what was left, drifting up to us from the dark water, was the old man's voice, gone high and thin and astonished, crying out a single thing over and over, the way a man cries the one fact, large enough to have pushed everything else out of him. "My feet," he cried. "Oh, oh, my feet. My feet are burning. My feet are made of fire." It did not come from down by the water anymore. By the third time he cried it, it came from off to the east, a long way off, much too far for any man to have walked or run in the time he had been gone. By the fifth time it came from the west, and from higher up, as though the old man were being carried at the height of the pine tops. "My feet of fire," the voice wept, wheeling above the dark forest, far and faint and growing fainter. "My burning feet. Oh, I cannot put them down." And then we could not hear him at all, and the boy and I sat down in the cold ash of the fire because neither of us could keep standing, and we waited for a dawn that I was no longer certain the quiet road intended to allow. It allowed it. The grey came up through the pines the way it always had, indifferent, on time. I made the boy eat. I did it with my hands, putting the hard bread into his hands and folding his fingers over it and waiting. And after a while, he ate. And then, because the alternative was to sit on that shelf of ground until the road came back for the rest of us, I made the decision a guide is paid to make, and I touched the boy's shoulder, and I pointed down, toward the water, toward where the old man had gone. I want to tell you why. The boy could not ask, and so I could not explain, and he followed me down toward that black tarn, not knowing the reason, and I have always been sorry he had to do it blind. The reason was this. I had been 4 times down the quiet road. I had learned one thing about it that the boundary men do not know, because the boundary men never go in far enough to learn it. The quiet road, when it takes a man, is not always finished with him. Sometimes it sends a part of him back, and the part it sends back goes looking for the people who knew him, because it still has, somewhere in it, the man's memory of who those people are, and what their names are, and exactly how a voice should sound when it says them. I did not take the boy down to that water to bury his uncle. I took him down because whatever was wearing his uncle was, even then, climbing back up the slope toward our camp, and an open shelf of ground with the dawn behind us was a far better place to meet it than a blind, dark trail. I wanted the light. I wanted to choose the ground. We did not have to go far. We met it at the edge of the trees, where the slope leveled, with the tarn flat and black below, and the cold grey light coming down even and merciless through the pines. It was Halse. I need you to hear how much it was Halse. I had braced the boy, with my hand, with my eyes, to see a monster, and the road did not give us a monster. The road is far better at its work than that. What came up out of the trees was an old man in a trapper's coat, walking toward us, lifting one scarred hand in the small, glad wave of a man rejoining his people after a fright. It was his face. It was his walk. Almost his walk. It was everything the boy had loved arranged in exactly the order the boy had loved it in. Only the feet were wrong. He walked to us across the moss and he left, on that pale moss that takes every footprint and every sound, a line of black, scorched prints, each one smoking very faintly in the cold air. And his eyes, when they found the boy, were glad. They were so glad. And they did not, at any point, no matter where the boy moved, quite manage to look at him. They looked a little beside him, the way you look beside a sound when you are trying to find the thing that made it. It stopped a few steps off. It smiled the old man's smile, and it spoke in the old man's voice, and the voice was warm, and the voice was perfect.
"There you are," it said. "Tovin, there you are, boy. God, you gave me a fright. I lost the trail in the dark. I have been all night finding my way back to you." The smile widened. "Well, don't just stand there staring at your old uncle. Say something. Tell me you're glad to see me." The boy did not say anything. I stepped in front of the boy. I did not speak. Even then, even there, I kept the road's rule, because the rule does not stop mattering just because the worst has already happened. The rule is the only thing that had kept any of us alive that long. I stepped between the thing and the boy, and I let it look at me instead. It did not want me. I felt that at once. It flicked the old man's glad eyes across me and away, the way you glance at a locked door and dismiss it, and it leaned pleasantly to see the boy around me. "Now that's no way to be," it said. "Tovin, come out from behind the man, there's a good lad. Your uncle's had a hard night." A small, wounded laugh, Halse's laugh, the exact pitch of it. "Have I done something? Have I made you angry, boy? Then tell me so. Tell me what I've done and I'll set it right. I always have, haven't I? But you have to tell me. You have to say it. I can't." And here the voice dropped and gentled and became unbearable. "I can't quite find you, Tovin, if you won't say anything. It's so dark in here. Just say my name. Just say, Uncle. Say it once so I know which way to come." And I watched the boy understand the whole shape of the trap. And I watched him understand that he had been training for this since the boundary stones without knowing it. Because it had told the truth. That was the horror of it. The thing could not lie, or did not need to. It could not quite find him. It had his uncle's memory, and his uncle's voice, and his uncle's love, all of it real, none of it counterfeit. But it did not have Tovin. Not yet. It did not have the boy's location in the world, and it could not take a soul it could not locate. It needed the boy to put up a hand in the dark. It needed one word back. It had spent a dead brother to earn one word from the old man, and now it stood in the old man's ruined skin and asked the boy, with the old man's whole aching tenderness, for one more. And the boy who had been quiet all the way down the worst road in the north, the boy who had decided at the boundary stones that he no longer had a name, the boy who had practiced and practiced and practiced being nobody. The boy stood behind my shoulder, and he looked at the last living piece of his family, begging him for a single word, and he gave it nothing. No word, no sound, not the smallest breath shaped like an answer. Tears went down his face in a steady, silent sheet, and he let them. Tears are not an answer. The road does not take you for weeping. He simply, with everything he had, refused to be heard. It tried for a long time. "I will not give you all of it. There is a mercy I can do here, and I'm going to do it. And the mercy is that I will not repeat every voice it used after Halse's voice stopped working. It used his mother's,
It used, God forgive it, a child's voice, small and frightened, calling for Tovin from back down the trail as if some other boy were lost in the trees. Toward the end, it used mine. It turned to the boy and it spoke in my voice, calm and certain, and it said, "Tovin, it's all right. The danger's past. You can answer him now. I'm telling you that you can." And that was the only moment I was truly afraid, because that was clever, and because the boy's eyes came to me. They came to me to check. And I looked back at him, and I did the only thing the rules still let me do. I shook my head, once, slowly, the way I had shaken it at his uncle in the dark. No. And the boy believed the man in front of him, and not the voice. And he looked away from both of us, out at the flat black water, and he held. You cannot answer a thing forever, but you can answer it for longer than it can ask. That is the secret the boundary men never learn, because the boundary men think the rule is, do not speak. And the rule is not, do not speak. The rule is, outlast it. The quiet road is patient, but its patience is not endless. Its patience is only longer than a frightened man's. It is not longer than a boy who has decided, all the way down in the cold root of himself, that he would sooner stop being a person than be a person who answers. The light came up full, and the thing wearing Halse stopped, mid-word, the way the weeping in the trees had stopped on the second night. Not defeated, I want to be precise. The quiet road is never defeated. It stopped the way a hand stops, when it has decided this particular tool will not open this particular lock, and it is time to put the tool down. The glad, false eyes went flat. The smile stayed, but nothing lived behind it now. And the thing turned on its scorched and smoking feet, and it walked back down the slope, unhurried, toward the black tarn, and the old man's body went down into that flat, dark water without breaking the surface, without one ripple, the way a thing goes back into a pocket. And the water lay there, still, and held the grey sky, and gave us nothing back. We walked 4 days out. The boy did not speak on any of them. I expected each morning that the worst being over would let some sound back into him, a word, a breath, the small, unconscious noise a living body makes. It did not come. He had gone down into the silence to save his life, and he had pulled the silence in after him like a stone over a door, and he did not, in those 4 days, find the way back out. And I began to understand that he might not ever. We came up out of the trees and through the boundary stones on the 4th evening, into wind, into birdsong, into the loud, ordinary, blessed world. And I watched the boy flinch from all of it, from the sheer noise of living things, the way you flinch from a bright light. The trapper Corin was not there. Corin had gone home to Mel long before, and was, I'm glad to say, the one wholly fortunate man in this story. The boy stood between the leaning stones at the edge of the quiet road in his father's coat that he would now never grow into, because he had stopped, somewhere down by that black water, growing toward anything at all. I brought him back to Mel. I gave the old man's remaining coin to the boundary priest with instructions to see the boy housed and fed. And before I left him, because I had to leave him, I cannot stop walking roads, you know this about me by now. Before I left him, I did one last thing, and I have never been sure it was a kindness. I leaned down to him, and I put my mouth near his ear, the way I had on the last night, and I told him the truth in the quietest voice I own. You did everything right, I said. You understand me? Everything. He is not gone because you failed him. He is gone because he loved his brother out loud, and you are alive because you loved your uncle in silence. And both of those are the same thing, boy. They are the same thing, wearing different coats. You did not lose him. You kept yourself. That was the only thing down there that was ever yours to keep. He looked at me, and he nodded. That nod, his nod, the good grip on the heavy thing. And I saw that he had heard me, and I saw that it had not reached the place the silence had closed over. I've been back through Mel since, twice. Tovin is a grown man there now. He works wood, quiet work, the right work for him. The chair and the door and the table do not need to be spoken to. The town has made its peace with him. They say he is simple, which he is not. They say he is mute, which is not quite true either. He can speak. I have been told by the priest that perhaps twice a year, in great need, he will say a few low words, and that they cost him something to say, and that you can see the cost. But he will not say his own name. He will not answer to it. The priest told me that if you call the boy Tovin across the square, he will not turn. That he has trained the whole town patiently over years to get his attention some other way, with a touch, with a raised hand, with anything at all that is not the sound of a voice saying his name. The priest thought this was the saddest part, and told it to me as the saddest part. I did not tell the priest that it is not sad. I did not tell him that it is the boy still doing, every single day, out in the safe, loud, ordinary world, the one thing that kept him alive, refusing forever to be a person who can be found by a voice that knows him. The quiet road taught him the price of being heard. He simply believed the lesson. He is the best student that road has ever had, and he is paying for the lesson still, and he will pay it until he is in the ground. So, that is the tale, and here is the toll of it. The thing I bring you tales to tell you. The reason I keep walking out of these roads to sit a while in your firelight before I forget. You will hear your name. Not on the quiet road, you will likely never see the quiet road, but in some thinner, slyer way, in some ordinary dark, you will hear a voice you love say your name and mean, "Come closer." And it will be perfect. It will have the warmth right and the want right, and it will forgive you in advance for everything, if you will only answer. Be slow. That is all I am. Be slow to answer the voice that knows exactly how you like to be called. Make it wait. Make it ask twice. The true ones will not mind the waiting. The true ones never have. It is only the other kind that cannot abide a silence. The fire is low, and I have a road in the morning, and you have been very kind to listen. Sleep if you can, and if something says your name tonight, in a voice you would know anywhere, let it say it again.